We've been talking mainly about three operations using decimals. We've been talking about addition, subtraction, and multiplication. What we're going to be talking about today is which of these three operations are being expressed in the problem. So how to look at the language of the problems, make sure we understand if it's addition, subtraction, or multiplication, so we know when to use those skills in order to solve problems. So let's kind of read this together. Boston received 8 and 33 inches of rain in August. In September, it rained another 4 and 65 inches. What was the total amount of rainfall during the 2 months? Okay, so let's look at this. So the question is here. So the first thing I always ask people to do is make sure when you're doing word problems that you identify the question. Okay, so usually we underline the question. Okay, what was the total amount of rainfall during the 2 months? All right, now what do we need to know? So now we need to look for some information. It's asking about the total amount of rainfall. So what do I know about the rain? I know that they got 8 and 33 inches in August, and I know that they have 4 and 65 inches in September. And if I'm looking for important words, I'm going to notice here that there's a very important word that comes up here, and it's asking me for a total, okay? And then here it also says another, okay? So there's a couple important words. So I have two numbers. I'm looking for a total of those two numbers. Now, because the two numbers are different and I'm looking for a total, I am going to be adding in this problem, okay? If I was looking for a total and I had the same amount every month for 5 months, then I would be multiplying. But because the numbers are different and I have to put them together, I'm going to be adding. Remember, when you're adding, you have to set your numbers up with a decimal on top of the decimal, the ones place on top of the ones place, the tenths place on top of the tenths place, and the hundredths place on top of the hundredths place. And then you can add them together. And that you put your decimal straight down into the answer between the ones and the tenths. Okay? Now, Billy ran 100 yards in 12 and 8/10 seconds. Javon ran the same distance in 13 and 2/10 seconds. How much less was Billy's time than Javon's? So you have two times. You're looking for how much less. So if you ever have it say how much more or how much less, you're looking at trying to figure out the difference between the two numbers. How far apart are those two numbers? So if you're trying to figure out how far apart two numbers are, or how much more or how much less, to do either of those things, you're actually going to subtract because you're looking at how far apart they are, what the difference is. So, and how do I know this? Again, if I look at the language here, and I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over this, but how much less was Billy's time than Javon? That's our question. What do we know about the times? We go back and we find the information. The times are here. And how much less? Again, we're looking for the difference between the two, so we're going to be subtracting. Again, when you're subtracting, just like when you're adding, you need to make sure you line up your decimals on top of your decimals, ones place over the ones place, tenths place over the tenths place, and in this case we have tens as well, so tens over tens. So remember, when you're adding and subtracting, you line up the decimals and you line up the place values. The cost of admission to the matinee show at a movie theater is $6.75. If 7 friends want to see the matinee showing of their favorite movie, how much will it cost? Okay, so let's see, how much will it cost? That's my question, so I'm going to underline it. Okay, so how much will it cost? So what do I know about the cost? I know that it is $6.75. So what else do I need to know? Oh, I need to know that 7 friends want to see the show. So that means I'm going to have $6.75 for each friend. So I don't have different amounts for each friend. I have the same amount for each friend. So what that means is I'm going to take $6.75 and I'm going to multiply it by 7. Okay? Now the important thing to know about this is that when you're multiplying, you don't have to line up the decimal. Okay? So you notice that the decimal's here and then you have 7. If you were adding, the 7 would have to be over here underneath the ones place. But when you're multiplying, you can ignore the decimal until the very end, okay? So that's going to be the difference. So in this case, you just multiply. You go 7 times 5 is 35, carry the 3. 7 times 7 is 49, plus 3 is 52, carry the 5. Okay, 42 plus 5 is 47. Okay, and then here's what to remember when you're multiplying. When you're multiplying, you come over here and you count how many numbers are after the decimal. So you have a decimal here and you have 1, 2 numbers after the decimal there total. So again, you have 1, 2, okay? And then you go down here and you look at this one. And in 7, the decimal would be right here, but there are no numbers after the decimal. So there's nothing there. So that means we're going to move it a total of 2 spaces. So we come down here and we go 1, 2, and the decimal is going to go right here. So it's going to cost her $47.25. Okay, so one last problem. Let's read it together. Katie ran 10 miles during the week. David ran 0.9 or 9/10 of that distance. How far did David run? Okay, so again, identify your question. My question is, how far did David run? What do I know about him running? I know that he ran 9/10 of that distance. Well, what is that distance? That distance was 10 miles. So I know that he wrote 9/10 of, or I'm sorry, not wrote, that he ran 9/10 of that distance. So this word here, of that distance, is really important because that's going to let you know what the operation is. Okay, if you are finding a decimal of a number, so 9/10 is a decimal, if you're finding a decimal amount of a number, then what you need to do in order to do that is you're actually going to multiply. So if I was finding, and this works for decimals or fractions, you can find this by multiplication. So if I was finding 25 hundredths of something, I would multiply that something times 25 hundredths. If I'm finding 9/10 of something, I'm going to multiply that number times 9/10. So this is going to be multiplication. Because I'm multiplying by 10, this is actually going to be pretty easy because 9 times 10 is 90. So I have 90, right? And then I look at the problem, and in the problem I have one number after the decimal, so I'm going to put my decimal in one place. So it's going to be 9.0, which is the same thing as 9, okay? However, I don't even have to do it that way because remember way back when, if you multiply something by 10, your number moves up one place value, which is the same as moving the decimal back one place value for every 0. So it's going to be 9.